The great hall of Nexus Prime buzzed with voices from 47 different worlds. Ambassador Jake Morrison sat at the human table, watching the alien delegates argue about trade routes and mining rights. His advisor, Lisa Park, shuffled through data pads while Commander Ryan Bell kept his eyes on the security feeds. Jake had been Earth's voice in this council for 3 years. 3 long years of being treated like children who should be grateful for scraps. The other species acted like humans were lucky just to have chairs in this room. They forgot that humans had earned their place here with blood and sweat. Chairman Veltar stood at the center podium. His blue skin gleamed under the lights as he raised his forearms for silence. The Zinthari always loved dramatic gestures. Around him, the other council members settled into their seats. The insect-like Zakth clicked her mandibles. The crystal, being called Prism of Knowledge, hummed softly. The reptilian Sauridians hissed among themselves. Today we discuss new safety measures, Veltar announced. His voice carried across the hall through translation devices. The junior species protocols will help guide our newer members. Jake felt his jaw tighten. Lisa looked up from her data pad with worry in her eyes. Ryan's hand moved closer to his sidearm. They all knew what was coming. High Counselor Jextai of the Aquilians rose from his seat. The fish-like alien's gills fluttered as he spoke. These protocols will limit expansion rights for species that joined the Council less than 50 years ago. This includes restrictions on military ship construction and mandatory oversight of all colonization efforts. The Aquilian's words hit the human delegation like a slap. Jake remembered the last war when human ships had saved 3 Aquilian worlds from the Devourer fleet. He remembered human doctors working day and night to cure the Crimson Plague that had killed millions across the galaxy. He remembered human engineers fixing the broken hyperspace gates that connected dozens of worlds. Furthermore, Jextai continued, these junior species must request permission before establishing new trade agreements. We cannot allow inexperienced civilizations to destabilize established economic networks. A Vortan delegate nodded approval. The humans especially need guidance. Their aggressive nature makes them dangerous without proper supervision. Jake stood slowly. The hall grew quiet as all eyes turned to him. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his eyes burned with controlled anger. Lisa grabbed his arm, but he gently pulled away. Aggressive nature? Jake's voice carried clearly across the hall. Is that what you call it when human ships arrived? At Kepler 7 just in time to stop the Ceridian mining accident from killing 10,000 workers? When Dr. Angela Rodriguez developed the cure for the quantum virus that was spreading through crystalline space? The hall remained silent. Jake walked away from his table and moved toward the center of the room. You call us aggressive when, Captain? Kevin Hayes coordinated the defense of the Outer Rim for 2 years without losing a single system. When human medics saved more lives during the Void War than any other species combined. Veltar raised one hand. Ambassador Morrison, please return to your seat. These protocols are for the good of all council members. Jake ignored him. He looked around the room at faces that showed everything from smugness to embarrassment. The gentle trader representative Tice looked uncomfortable. The ancient guardian sat motionless as always, but most of the others either nodded agreement with the protocols or avoided eye contact entirely. For 3 years, humanity has contributed to this council, Jake continued. Our ships patrol your borders. Our doctors heal your sick. Our engineers maintain the technology that keeps your worlds connected. Our diplomats prevent wars that would cost millions of lives. He paused, letting his words sink in. In the silence, the only sound was the soft humming of the station's life support systems. But you still see us as children who need permission to live our lives. You still think we should be grateful for the chance to serve species that consider themselves our betters. Prism of Knowledge's crystalline form chimed softly. The protocols ensure stability. Young species often make mistakes that affect the entire galaxy. Jake turned toward the crystal being. Mistakes like developing the quantum resonance technology that powers this very station? Mistakes like creating the medical scanners that detect diseases before they become epidemics? Mistakes like designing the defense grids that have kept the Devourer fleet from returning? The crystal entity fell silent. Around the room, other delegates shifted uncomfortably. They knew Jake was right, but admitting it would mean changing policies they had already decided on. "We came here seeking partnership," Jake said, his voice growing stronger. "We offered our knowledge, our strength, our friendship. We asked only for respect and fair treatment." He looked directly at Veltar. "Instead, we found prejudice dressed up as policy. We found fear disguised as wisdom. We found species so proud of their age that they forgot the value of new ideas." Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out his council credentials, the small device that gave him access to council facilities and communications. He placed it on the nearest table with a soft click. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. The hall erupted. Delegates jumped to their feet, shouting in dozens of languages. Translation devices struggled to keep up with the chaos. Veltar banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Jake walked back to his table where Lisa and Ryan waited. Both had already removed their own credentials and communication devices. Other human staff members throughout the hall did the same, placing their access cards on tables and walking toward the exits. "You cannot simply leave," Veltar shouted over the noise. "There are procedures for withdrawal, forms to complete, transition periods to arrange." Jake stopped at the great doors of the council chamber. He turned back one last time to look at the chaos he was leaving behind. "Keep your procedures," he said quietly, but his words carried through the hall's speakers. "Humanity is done asking permission to exist." The human delegation walked out together, their footsteps echoing in the corridors of Nexus Prime. Behind them, the shouting continued, but it no longer mattered. They were going home. As the doors closed behind them, Jake felt something he had not experienced in 3 years of council service. He felt free. The news spread across the galaxy faster than a hyperspace jump. On Earth, President Helen Carter sat in the Oval Office, watching reports pour in from every human outpost and colony. Secretary of Defense Paul Wright stood beside her desk, while Admiral Susan Clark projected holographic displays of human positions throughout known space. "How many people are we talking about?" President Carter asked. Admiral Clark touched her tablet and the numbers appeared in the air before them. 2 million human civilians working on alien worlds, 300,000 military personnel in joint operations, 800 commercial vessels currently in non-human space. And they all got the message? Every human commander received Ambassador Morrison's withdrawal order within 6 hours, Paul Wright confirmed. Operation Exodus is already underway. The president nodded. She had authorized Jake Morrison to make this decision if the council pushed too far. Now there was no turning back. Across the galaxy, the withdrawal began immediately. On New Shanghai Station, Marcus Chen walked through the corridors he had called home for 5 years. The massive trading post orbited between human and Vorthan space, handling cargo from dozens of worlds. Marcus had built the station's computer networks from scratch and trained the alien staff to use human efficiency protocols. Now he was shutting it all down. His teams moved through the human sections, downloading critical data and removing key components. The Vorthon merchants who shared the station watched in growing panic as their human partners packed up and left. "You cannot abandon the station," protested Kextar, the Vorthon trade supervisor. "We have contracts, legal obligations." Marcus sealed another data core and handed it to one of his technicians. "Check your contracts, Kextar. Everyone has a clause about political changes affecting operations. The council just made humanity a political liability." "But the cargo, shipments, the route calculations, the maintenance schedules." "You'll figure it out," Marcus said, not looking back as he headed for the shuttle bay. "You managed trade for centuries before humans arrived. I'm sure you can manage again." On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Chief Engineer Brad Thompson supervised the evacuation of 300 human workers from the tritanium extraction facilities. The massive machines that pulled precious metals from the planet's core had been designed by human engineers and required human expertise to operate safely. Brad's supervisor, a Ceridian named Vorth, followed him around the main processing plant. "You must leave technical manuals, training materials, something to help us continue operations." "I must do nothing," Brad replied, watching his people board transport ships. These machines are human-designed using human engineering principles. Your people never bothered to learn how they work because you assumed we would always be here to run them. Vorth's scales shifted color, a sign of distress among his people. The Hegemony Corporation invested billions in these facilities. We cannot simply abandon them. Brad stopped and looked at the Ceridian. Funny how quickly abandonment becomes a problem when it happens to you. Where was this concern when the Council decided to abandon human rights? The transport ships lifted, off, leaving behind facilities that had produced 80% of the planet's mineral output. Within hours, the extraction operations ground to a halt. The Ceridians discovered that their backup systems could barely maintain 20% efficiency. Dr. Angela Rodriguez had spent 7 years studying alien biology on 17 different worlds. Her research teams had mapped genetic structures, identified biological hazards, and developed safety protocols for human colonists. Now she was pulling every human scientist out of alien space. Her research partner, the crystalline entity Prism of Knowledge, vibrated with distress as Angela's team packed up their mobile laboratory. The terraforming project on Kepler 438c requires your biological expertise, Prism of Knowledge chimed. Without human analysis of local microorganisms, we cannot proceed safely. Angela sealed the last of her data containers. Then I suggest you learn to do the analysis yourself. We offered to teach your people our methods dozens of times. You always said crystalline intelligence was superior to biological research techniques. That was theoretical discussion, not practical application. Well, now you get to test your theories practically, Angela replied, boarding her shuttle. Good luck. Captain Kevin Hayes commanded the Joint Defense Fleet stationed at the Outer Rim, where known space met the darkness beyond. His ships worked alongside vessels from 6 different species to patrol the border and watch for threats from hostile forces. The arrangement had worked perfectly for 2 years, with human tactical expertise complementing alien technology in numbers. Now Kevin was withdrawing every human ship from the Joint Fleet. Hive Queen Zaketh, the insectoid commander of the largest alien contingent, met him in the command center one last time. This withdrawal weakens our defensive capabilities by 40%. Zaketh clicked through her translator. The sector becomes vulnerable to external threats. Kevin finished downloading the tactical databases from the Central Command computers. The Council decided humans were too aggressive to be trusted with military operations. I'm sure you can handle sector defense without our aggressive tendencies getting in the way. The Council protocols were about oversight, not capability assessment. Really? Kevin looked up from his work. Because High Counselor HFY specifically mentioned human aggressive nature as a reason for restrictions. The official record shows 12 different council members expressing concerns about human military methods. Zaketh's compound eyes reflected the light from her command displays. Those statements were political positioning, not operational assessment. Well, now you can position all you want without worrying about human interference, Kevin said, heading for the docking bay where his ships waited. The Outer Rim is yours to defend. I'm sure your political positioning will be very effective against Devourer raiders. Back on Nexus Prime, the council chambers had descended into chaos. Chairman Veltar pounded his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order as representatives from dozens of species shouted over each other. Emergency reports flooded in from across the galaxy as human withdrawals disrupted operations on world after. World High Counselor HFY stood at his seat, his gills flapping rapidly. This is clearly a negotiating tactic. The humans will return once they realize the economic cost of leaving established trade networks. Counselor Thys of the Gentle. Traders looked up from her datapad with worry written across her features. Early reports suggest otherwise. Human merchant vessels are already forming independent convoy routes. They appear to be establishing direct trade relationships with non-council species. Impossible, snorted Vorth's representative from the Ceridian delegation. Humans lack the infrastructure for independent operations. The ancient guardian spoke for the first time in months, its voice carrying easily through the chamber. Pride often blinds us to reality. The young species has demonstrated remarkable adaptability throughout their brief galactic presence. Veltar waved one hand dismissively. They will face massive logistical challenges without Council support systems. Their ships require maintenance facilities located in Council space. Their colonies depend on trade routes we control. They will return, within weeks, probably with apologies for this emotional outburst. A communication officer approached the chairman's platform. The young Vorthon looked nervous as he handed over a datapad. Veltar read the message and his blue skin paled noticeably. "What is it?" Jextai demanded. "The humans have sealed all hyperspace gates in the Sol system," Veltar announced. "They are no longer accepting Council vessels or communication attempts. Earth has effectively cut itself off from the galactic network." The chamber fell silent. Sealing hyperspace gates was not a simple process. It required advanced technology and careful planning. The humans had clearly prepared for this moment well in advance. "How long until the economic disruptions force them to reconsider?" asked the Vorthon trade representative. This looked up from her calculations with a grim expression. "Based on initial reports, we may face economic disruption before they do. Human operations were integrated into far more systems than our records indicated." "Preposterous," Jextai declared. "The Council managed galactic affairs for millennia before humans arrived. We can certainly manage without them now." But even as he spoke, reports continued arriving. Transport delays, production shutdowns, communication failures, system malfunctions. The human withdrawal was revealing just how deeply their expertise had become woven into the fabric of galactic civilization. Outside the Council chambers, the first cracks in the galactic order had already begun to show. 3 weeks after the human withdrawal, the galaxy was falling apart. Trade routes that had worked smoothly for decades now faced constant delays and shortages. The efficient human cargo fleet, which had handled 40% of all intersector freight, was gone. Captain Danny Torres and his merchant marine had vanished into human space, leaving massive gaps in the supply chains that connected hundreds of worlds. On the industrial world of Factorum Prime, factories sat idle because raw materials from 12 different systems could not reach them on schedule. The Vorthon factory managers discovered that their previous delivery schedules had been possible only because human cargo captains worked longer shifts and took more dangerous routes than other species would accept. The humans were willing to push their ships harder and sleep less, explained Korth, the facility supervisor, to his increasingly angry board of directors. "Our other carriers refuse to match their schedules. They claim the routes are too dangerous and the timing is unreasonable." The board members clicked their mandibles in frustration. Factorum Prime had contracts to fulfill across 6 sectors. Without steady supplies, they would face massive penalty payments and lost customers. The Technological Council issued an emergency report that sent shockwaves through every civilized world. The synthetic beings called the Collective had finally completed their analysis of galactic infrastructure dependencies. The results were worse than anyone had imagined. Human innovations had been quietly integrated into virtually every major system across known space. The faster-than-light communication arrays that connected distant worlds used quantum resonance technology, developed by Dr. Patricia Wells. The massive computer systems that managed planetary economies ran on quantum computing matrices designed by Professor Alan Brooks. Even the translation devices that allowed different species to communicate incorporated human language processing algorithms. Without human maintenance and continued development, these systems will begin degrading within 6 months, announced Unit Prime, the Collective's spokesman. Complete failure is projected within 18 months. The military situation was even worse. Admiral Sarah Collins had been coordinating joint defense strategies across 6 sectors from her command post on Nexus Prime. Her withdrawal left massive gaps in galactic defense networks, just as long-range sensors detected unusual movement. Beyond the outer rim, Captain Ryan Stone, formerly the human liaison for the joint patrol fleets, had taken with her not just tactical knowledge but also the trust relationships that kept diverse species working together. Without her diplomatic bridge building, the multinational fleets began fragmenting along species lines. The warrior caste Krillians, who had always viewed humans as weak, suddenly found themselves requesting immediate backup as their border defenses proved inadequate. The warlike species had relied heavily on human strategic planning and coordination support, though they had never admitted it publicly. "Our defensive formations are failing," reported War Leader Grix to the Council emergency session. "The human tactical officers provided real-time coordination that we cannot replicate. Our individual ship commanders are excellent fighters, but they lack the human ability to think several moves ahead." Chairman Veltar shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The emergency session had been running for 6 hours as crisis reports poured in from across the galaxy. His political career was crumbling as badly as the systems he was supposed to manage. The economic situation grew worse daily. The Central Banking Consortium announced that human-designed financial algorithms had been preventing market manipulation across 12 sectors. Without these safeguards, speculation ran wild. 3 major currencies collapsed within days as traders realized no one was monitoring the automated systems that detected artificial price manipulation. Dr. Christopher Barnes, the xenocultural specialist who had spent years developing translation protocols for newly contacted species, had taken his universal communication matrices with him. The loss became critical when the Council attempted to welcome a new species called the Ethereal Singers to galactic society. Without proper translation protocols, the first contact became a disaster. The Ethereal Singers communicated through complex harmonic patterns that required specialized equipment to interpret. Dr. Barnes had been working on translation algorithms for their language for 2 years. Without his research, the Council representatives accidentally insulted the newcomers during their welcome ceremony. The Ethereal Singers withdrew from contact entirely, convinced that the Galactic Council was hostile to their culture. It was the first time in Council history that a new species had rejected membership because of communication failures. Councillor Thys stood before the emergency assembly with a datapad full of economic projections. Her usually calm demeanor showed cracks of strain as she delivered the latest reports. "Trade volume has decreased by 28% across all Council territories," she announced. "Manufacturing output is down 18%. Transportation efficiency has dropped to 60% of previous levels. At this rate, we face economic collapse within 3 months." High Councillor Jex Tai, who had pushed hardest for the junior species protocols, found himself dealing with a personal crisis. His homeworld of Aquilia requested emergency assistance for a failing atmospheric processor that maintained breathable air for the underwater cities. The processor used human-designed filtration systems, and no Aquilian engineer understood how to repair them. "The irony is not lost on me," Jextai admitted quietly to Thys after the session. "I argued that humans needed supervision, and now my own people need their help to breathe." The crisis deepened when the ancient protector species, the enigmatic guardians who rarely spoke in council sessions, finally addressed the assembly. The guardian representative was an entity older than most civilizations present. When it spoke, its words carried the weight of eons. "In our long existence, we have observed many galactic alliances rise and fall," the guardian said, its voice resonating through the chamber. "Every successful union we have witnessed was built on mutual respect, not hierarchical dominance. Every failure began with pride overcoming wisdom." The ancient being paused, allowing its words to sink in. The young species who called themselves human demonstrated more wisdom in leaving than this council has shown in remaining together. They recognized what you failed to see. Partnership cannot exist where one side believes itself inherently superior to the other. The guardian's words hung in the air like a judgment. Around the chamber, representatives who had voted for the junior species protocols looked uncomfortable. The species that had remained neutral during the vote now seemed vindicated in their caution. Meanwhile, intelligence reports began filtering in about human activities outside council space. Rather than collapsing without galactic support, humanity appeared to be thriving. Admiral Clark had been establishing independent trade relationships with non-council species beyond the outer rim. Captain Nicole Rogers had made successful contact with 3 previously unknown civilizations and was negotiating mutual defense agreements. Most shocking of all, reports suggested that humanity had made significant technological advances in just 6 weeks of isolation. The spy networks run by the shadowy Wraith Collective reported that humans had developed improved faster-than-light drives, more efficient energy systems, and defensive technologies that surpassed current galactic standards. How is this possible? Veltar demanded when he received the intelligence briefings. They have been isolated for less than 2 months. Technological development requires time, resources, and research facilities. The Wraith operative delivering the report remained hidden in shadows as always. It appears that council bureaucracy and approval processes had been significantly slowing human innovation. Without the need to submit research proposals and wait for committee approvals, their scientists have accelerated development timelines dramatically. The revelation hit the council leadership like a physical blow. For years, they had told themselves that council oversight was helping guide human development. The reality was that their bureaucracy had been holding humanity back. Without those restrictions, human ingenuity was flourishing at an unprecedented rate. Dr. Lisa Morgan's cybersecurity systems began failing across multiple worlds, leaving entire planets vulnerable to data theft and system crashes. The Vorthan banking networks, which handled currency exchange for half the galaxy, suffered 3 major security breaches in 1 week. The medical crisis worsened when the healing caste Zanari admitted they could not replicate human surgical techniques developed by Dr. Ryan Walsh. The procedures had saved thousands of lives during the recent plague outbreaks, but no non-human surgeon had mastered the delicate neural interface operations that Dr. Walsh had pioneered. "We have the medical knowledge in our databases," explained Healer Prime Zeph to the Council Health Committee. "But knowledge and skill are different things. Dr. Walsh spent years developing these techniques through practice and innovation. Reading about his methods is not the same as having his expertise." As the crisis reports multiplied, one fact became increasingly clear. The Galactic Council had not just lost human cooperation. They had lost the foundation that held their civilization together. The humans had not simply been members, and 6 weeks into the crisis, the Galactic Council faced complete systemic collapse. The joint patrol fleets that had maintained peace across dozens of sectors were falling apart. Captain Rachel Stone, formerly the human liaison for the multinational forces, had taken with her not just tactical knowledge, but also the diplomatic skills that kept diverse species working together. Without her patient bridge building between species with centuries-old rivalries, the joint fleets began fracturing along ethnic lines. The proud Krillian warriors refused to take orders from Vorthan commanders. The methodical crystalline entities could not coordinate with the impulsive Aquilian squadrons. What had been an efficient fighting force became a collection of separate fleets that barely communicated with each other. War leader Grix stood in the command center of Fortress Station Omega, watching tactical displays that showed the growing chaos. Red indicators marked border breaches where hostile forces had begun probing the weakened defenses. Yellow warnings showed areas where different council fleets had nearly fired on each other due to miscommunication. The humans made this look easy, Grix admitted to his aide, a young Krillian officer named Vex. Captain Stone would translate not just languages but intentions. She understood how each species thought and fought. Without her, we are like blind warriors swinging weapons in the dark. The economic situation had moved beyond crisis into disaster. The Vorthan banking systems, which processed transactions for hundreds of worlds, suffered their 4th major collapse in 2 weeks. Without human-designed security protocols, hackers from criminal organizations were stealing billions of credits daily. Merchant Prince Koth, one of the wealthiest Vorthans in the galaxy, found himself facing bankruptcy as his trade empire crumbled. The shipping routes that had made him rich depended on human cargo captains who were willing to take dangerous shortcuts through unstable hyperspace corridors. Other species considered these routes too risky, adding weeks to delivery times and making his contracts impossible to fulfill. Captain Torres alone handled 30% of my high-priority shipments, Koth explained to his investors during an emergency meeting. His knowledge of hyperspace currents and willingness to push his ships to their limits kept my delivery promises realistic. Now I face penalty payments that will destroy my company. The technological breakdown accelerated beyond all projections. Dr. Michelle Brooks had been quietly maintaining critical systems across 17 different worlds through remote diagnostic programs. Her artificial intelligence protocols had been preventing system failures by predicting problems before they occurred. Without her oversight, cascading failures began hitting essential infrastructure. Power grids designed for one planet failed when trying to handle load increases. Water purification systems that had worked perfectly for years suddenly produced contaminated output. Transportation networks that moved millions of people daily began experiencing dangerous malfunctions. On the manufacturing world of industrial beta, 3 major accidents occurred in 1 week when automated systems failed safety checks that Dr. Brooks's programs had been performing invisibly. 12 workers died when a chemical processing plant exploded after its monitoring systems failed to detect a dangerous pressure buildup. The crisis deepened when the mysterious deep dwellers, ancient beings that lived in the space between stars, suddenly became active in Council territory. These creatures had been dormant for centuries, but something had awakened them. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures moving through deep space toward inhabited systems. The Council had never successfully communicated with the deep dwellers. Every attempt at contact over the past 500 years had failed. The ancient beings seemed completely uninterested in galactic civilization and had ignored all diplomatic efforts. Now they were moving with apparent purpose toward populated worlds, and no one knew why. "We need to establish communication immediately," Veltar announced during another emergency session. "If the deep dwellers have become hostile, we must understand their intentions." Unit Prime of the Collective accessed its databases and projected the grim statistics. Historical records show 847 failed contact attempts over 5 centuries. Linguistic analysis, mathematical concepts, artistic expressions, technological demonstrations, and empathic projections have all failed to generate responses. The ancient Guardian spoke from its position in the chamber's shadows. "The young human species achieved what we could not. Dr. Karen Wright established first contact with the deep dwellers 18 months ago. Her cultural sensitivity and patience succeeded where our attempts failed." The revelation stunned the assembly. Humans had successfully contacted a species that had mystified the galaxy for half a millennium, and they had never mentioned it to the Council. "Why were we not informed of this breakthrough?" Jextai demanded. "Perhaps," the Guardian replied with what might have been amusement, "because Dr. Wright knew the Council would demand control of the contact protocols and potentially damage a delicate relationship with bureaucratic interference." Intelligence reports about human activities continued to arrive, each one more humbling than the last. Humanity had not simply survived their isolation. They were building something that made the Galactic Council look primitive by comparison. Independent Systems Federation now included 22 species that had left Council space to join the Human Alliance. These were not failed civilizations seeking help. They were advanced societies that chose human partnership over Council membership. Captain Anthony Clark had established new trade routes that were more efficient than anything the Council managed. His merchant fleet used human-designed navigation systems that could calculate hyperspace jumps in real time, reducing travel time by 40% compared to Council standard routes. Dr. Michelle Brooks had made breakthrough discoveries in quantum biology that promised to revolutionize medicine across all known species. Her research, conducted without Council oversight committees and approval delays, had advanced faster in 2 months than previous galactic medical research had progressed in decades. Professor Eric Johnson had developed transportation technology that made Council hyperlanes seem like ancient artifacts. His new systems could move cargo and passengers between star systems in days rather than weeks. Most impressive of all, humanity had begun exploring regions of space that the Council had declared impossible to reach. Their improved technology was opening up vast areas for colonization and resource extraction. The Meridian War erupted when the Sauridian hegemony and the Aquilian Empire finally clashed over resource rights that had been mediated by human diplomats for 3 years. Captain Greg Miller's peacekeeping protocols had prevented dozens of similar conflicts through careful negotiation and compromise. Without his diplomatic framework, both sides reverted to traditional military solutions. The war began over mining rights to a single asteroid field. Within days, it had spread to 3 star systems as old grievances and territorial disputes exploded into open conflict. The Council tried to mediate, but their efforts only made things worse. HFY was too emotionally involved to negotiate fairly with the Sauridians. The Sauridian representative refused to accept Aquilian proposals. Both sides demanded terms that the other could never accept. "We need neutral arbitration," Thais suggested during a desperate late-night session. "Someone both sides trust to be fair." "The humans provided that service," Veltar replied bitterly. Captain Miller had the respect of both species because he had no stake in their territorial disputes. Every other council member has economic or political interests that compromise our neutrality. The war spread as other species began choosing sides or opportunistically grabbing territory, while the council was distracted. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for decades collapsed within weeks. Chairman Veltar found himself facing the complete failure of everything he had worked to build. The junior species protocols that were supposed to ensure stability had instead triggered the worst crisis in council history. His political allies had abandoned him as their own worlds faced the consequences of the human withdrawal. In a final desperate move, Veltar authorized a secret diplomatic mission to Earth. He chose this of the gentle traders to lead the delegation, hoping that her species' reputation for fairness might open communication channels that remained closed to council leadership. "Offer them anything," Veltar instructed privately. "Full council membership with no restrictions. Veto power over new policies. Whatever they want. We cannot survive much longer without them." Thais accepted the mission, but privately she wondered if it was already too late. The humans had been gone for 6 weeks. In that time, they had built new alliances, developed new technologies, and established new trade relationships. They might no longer need what the Council could offer. More troubling, the Council might no longer be able to offer anything that humanity would want. The galactic civilization that humans had left behind was crumbling faster than anyone had imagined possible. As Thys prepared for her mission to Sol System, reports arrived of 3 more species requesting to leave Council space and join the Human Federation. 3 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council was dying. The Meridian War had spread to 7 star systems as the Sauridian hegemony and Aquilian Empire fought over territory with increasing brutality. Without human peacekeeping, protocols, conflicts that should have been resolved through negotiation became military campaigns that consumed entire worlds. Captain Greg Miller's diplomatic frameworks had prevented over 40 potential wars during his 3 years of service. His patient approach to finding compromise solutions had seemed slow and boring to many council members. Now they realized that boring diplomacy was infinitely better than exciting warfare. The technological infrastructure continued its steady collapse. Dr. Lisa Morgan's cybersecurity systems had been protecting critical data networks across hundreds of worlds. Without her invisible oversight, criminal organizations began systematically attacking financial institutions, government databases, and communication networks. The Vorthan banking sector suffered complete collapse when hackers stole the encryption keys for their primary transaction networks. In one devastating attack, over 2 trillion credits vanished from secure accounts across 12 star systems. The theft destroyed confidence in digital currency, forcing many worlds back to primitive barter systems. Medical emergencies multiplied as alien doctors struggled to treat conditions that human physicians had handled routinely. Dr. Ryan Walsh had developed surgical techniques that seemed impossible to other species, but his procedures had saved thousands of lives during recent plague outbreaks. When a new strain of the Crimson Plague appeared on 3 different worlds, the healing caste, Zanari, found themselves helpless. They had Dr. Walsh's medical records and detailed procedure descriptions, but reading about his methods was completely different from having his skill and experience. The human surgeon could operate for 18 hours without rest. Healer Prime, Zeph explained to a desperate council health committee. His manual dexterity allowed him to work on neural pathways that our appendages cannot reach. His intuitive understanding of biological systems let him adapt procedures in real time when unexpected complications arose. The plague spread unchecked, killing thousands while the Council searched desperately for medical experts who could replicate human techniques. Chairman Veltar sat in his office reviewing reports that painted an increasingly hopeless picture. His political career was finished, but that seemed unimportant compared to the civilization crumbling around him. The junior species protocols that were supposed to ensure galactic stability had instead triggered the worst crisis in recorded history. This of the gentle traders stood before Veltar's desk, preparing to deliver the final blow to his remaining hopes. Her diplomatic mission to Earth had returned with news that destroyed any possibility of reversing the disaster. They would not even meet with us, This reported, her voice heavy with exhaustion. We were permitted to enter Sol system, but Earth's leaders were too busy with expansion projects to see council representatives. Veltar looked up from his reports with desperate eyes. Too busy? Surely they understand the crisis we face, the economic collapse, the spreading wars, the technological failures. They understand perfectly, Thais replied. They also no longer care. Admiral Janet Torres, who now serves as Earth's defense minister, told us very clearly that Earth's concerns lie with the Independent Systems Federation, not with the council that rejected human partnership. Thais activated a holographic display that showed human activities across the galaxy. The images revealed a transformed civilization that bore little resemblance to the species that had walked out of the council chambers 3 months earlier. Earth's orbital installations had expanded dramatically. Massive shipyards produced vessels with design characteristics that surpassed council technology. New colonies dotted previously unexplored star systems, connected by hyperspace routes that the council had not known existed. How did they advance so quickly? Veltar asked, staring at the impossible images. Without council bureaucracy slowing their research, Thais explained. Without committee approvals for every innovation. Without oversight boards questioning every decision. Human scientists and engineers have been working at maximum efficiency for 3 months. The display showed research facilities that dwarfed anything in council space. Dr. Michelle Brooks had established biological research centers on dozen worlds, making discoveries that advanced medical science by decades. Professor Eric Johnson's transportation laboratories had developed faster-than-light systems that made council hyperlanes obsolete. Most impressive of all, humanity had successfully contacted and allied with species that the council had never encountered. Captain Nicole Rogers commanded an exploration fleet that included vessels from 6 different civilizations that lived beyond the galactic rim. The Deep Dwellers have become active allies of the Human Federation, Thais continued. Dr. Karen Wright established not just communication but actual cooperation with beings we could never even speak to. They are sharing technology and knowledge that makes our most advanced systems look primitive. The revelation about the Deep Dwellers explained recent sensor readings that had confused council scientists. Massive energy signatures moving through space were not hostile invaders but allied vessels using technology beyond current galactic understanding. What did they say when you explained our situation? Veltar asked. The economic collapse? The spreading wars? Surely they recognized their moral obligation to help species they once worked alongside. Thais looked uncomfortable. Admiral Torres said that moral obligations work both ways. She reminded us that humans had offered partnership and cooperation for 3 years, only to be told they needed supervision because of their aggressive nature. She suggested we handle our current problems the same way the council expected humans to handle being treated as inferior children. The words hit Veltar like physical blows. Everything the council leadership had said about human aggression and need for guidance was being thrown back at them with devastating accuracy. Did you offer them full council membership, veto powers over policy decisions, complete autonomy for human operations? I offered everything you authorized, Thais replied. Admiral Torres thanked me politely and explained that the Independent Systems Federation provides everything humanity wants without the restrictions and prejudices that council membership would entail. Veltar realized with growing horror that humanity no longer needed the Galactic Council. The Federation they had built was more advanced, more efficient, and more successful than the civilization they had left behind. Intelligence reports confirmed the worst fears of council leadership. The Independent Systems Federation now included 31 species, with more requesting membership every week. These were not desperate civilizations seeking protection. They were advanced societies that recognized superior organization when they saw it. The Federation's economic system processed more trade volume than the Council managed, despite having fewer member species. Their military forces were smaller but far more effective, using human tactical innovations that made traditional battle doctrines obsolete. Their technological development proceeded at a pace that left Council research centers struggling to understand their basic principles. Most humbling of all, the Federation had achieved what the Council had claimed was impossible: peaceful cooperation between radically different species without hierarchical control structures. Every member civilization had equal voice and equal respect, regardless of when they joined or how long they had been spacefaring. High Counselor Jextai, the architect of the junior species protocols, faced the complete collapse of his political position. His home world of Aquilia had formally requested to leave Council space and join the Human Federation. The same atmospheric processing crisis that had revealed Aquilian dependence on human technology had convinced his people that Council membership was worthless. "My own citizens no longer trust my judgment," Jextai admitted during what everyone knew would be the final Council session. "They believe I traded away our future for the sake of political pride." Around the Council chamber, empty seats marked the species that had already departed. The gentle traders had voted to seek Federation membership. The crystalline entities had concluded that human innovation offered better development opportunities than Council bureaucracy. Even some Krillian warrior clans had chosen human military alliance over Council defense agreements. The ancient guardian spoke one final time to the remnants of the Council. "We have witnessed the rise and fall of many galactic civilizations. Each followed predictable patterns. Success bred arrogance. Arrogance bred blindness. Blindness bred the mistakes that destroyed what had been built." The Guardian's form began to fade as it prepared to enter dormancy once again. "The young species you dismissed demonstrated wisdom that this Council never achieved. They recognized that partnership requires mutual respect, not domination. They understood that true strength comes from cooperation, not control." As the Guardian disappeared, Veltar looked around the nearly empty chamber. Fewer than 20 species remained in what had once been a council of 47 civilizations. The galactic government that had ruled known space for millennia was ending not with war or conquest but with simple irrelevance. News.